Welcome to the Ripcord Moment. I'm your host, Joe Seetoo. Today I'm joined by Nikè Anani. She is an author, and with the book that she has done is called Lifetime to Legacy, and it's a new vision for multi-generational family businesses. She's got over a decade of experience in the family office space, working with businesses, helping to increase their enterprise value, specifically working with a second generation who are coming in to take over these family-run businesses. She's also the co-host of The Connected Generation. It's a top 10 podcast focused on the family office space and, again, family enterprise businesses. And then lastly, she's the co-founder of African Family Firms. It's a nonprofit community that she has established, again, for this space. So, Nikè, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited about our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm really excited as well.
Oh, so let's talk about your book that you've really poured a lot of work into, and this concept around lifetime to legacy. What is that all about?
Right. Lifetime's legacy is really just as you're thinking through as a business founder, how do I ensure that everything that I've built would outlive me? And I'm a family business owner myself, like you said in the introduction. And I found that on our journey, I'm second generation, my father's first generation. And as we were looking at how do we pass on the baton and how do we ensure that we have continuity and sustained impacts, not only over space, but also over time, a lot of the advisors that we were surrounded by were talking the language of the technical. They were talking the language of estate planning or tax planning or financial planning. But frankly, a lot of my experience where we got stuck was on the relational, right? It was around how do we make shared decision making? How do we improve our communication? How do we have good conflict resolution skills? How
And
do
to be
we
clear, this is between you and your father with the family intra-family dynamic.
intra-family dynamics? So not just myself and my father, but our nuclear
Well, yeah,
unit, right? So
yeah,
it was because to solve for the technicals quite straightforward. I
yeah,
find, right? I find a financial advisor and they tell me,
sure.
what to do.
What to do?
But for the relational, it was a lot more complex. And so that my first-hand experience made me realize just how important legacy planning entails, not just the technical, but also the relational. And I came across a study, a US-based study by the Williams Group
Okay.
that looked at family wealth transitions. And they found that just 30% of wealth transitions were successfully moved into the third generation,
Yeah.
right? And of those, for those of those 30%, the reasons why the 70% were not transitioning successfully was due to 95% was due to qualitative factors as opposed to quantitative factors.
So,
65% was due to lack of effective communication and trust.
okay.
25% was due to lack of prepared next generation or lack of engaged next generation. 15% was due to lack of a wealth mission, and just 5% was due to the traditional kind of transactional elements like your estate planning, your tax planning, and your wealth planning.
So I just want to pause real quick. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying more than half, 60-ish%, was due to lack of trust.
And communication. Yeah.
So communication, trust, those soft factors. That is utterly amazing. What and you, what do you attribute that to?
I think it's so all through like school, in our professional lives, we're equipped to speak in the language of the quantitative, but not the qualitative. It's very difficult. You work with business founders that are looking at their exits, right? How often do we have the spaces and places to process what's the meaning of money? What's the meaning of wealth? What do we want to do when, in the event of the inevitable, our deaths? And how do we start to engage the next generation in these conversations? These are very difficult topics to have conversations on. And typically, the first gens may be fearful that starting this conversation on wealth and money and purpose may actually lead to the next generation losing their motivation, losing their
Really?
drive,
Okay.
being derailed, so to speak. They don't want them to feel like they will have a pot of money that's there, and so they have entitlement issues, or
Sure.
that the money then taints them negatively, leads to bad actors coming around them? Are they
Yeah.
responsible and mature enough to handle the sensitivity of being a wealth owner or a future heir, so to speak? So a lot of these emotions really stop families from having effective and clear communication on matters of money, matters of wealth, matters of the business. Talking about the death of mom or dad is very difficult, right? How do you bring that
Sure.
up?
No,
How do you
yeah. So let me ask you, how have you infused that challenging part of the conversation into the kind of work that you're doing?
Right. Is to understand from my firsthand experience the fears of the next generation and the challenges they face, and also the fears of the first generation and the challenges they face. And I serve as a bridge builder. Really, I serve as bringing in safety into the room so we can have those difficult conversations. And I like to get my clients to be conscious of the fact that we're not talking about this singular event, the death of the founder. That's very confronting. That's very difficult to imagine, right? We're talking about the continuity and the legacy of the family. So,
Hmm.
how can we reframe away from the death of the founder and start thinking about what legacy do we want to be leaving
Yeah.
and living together? So, it's a collective process and it's a
Shared
continuous
process.
process,
Yeah.
right? That's more energizing and inspiring,
Oh, absolutely. Right. Sort of what are we building towards, right?
right?
Versus moving away from something that, has a negative feeling, like you were saying, or that is more fear-based.
Right.
Um, so this, I love this, the sort of more challenging things that are sort of beneath the surface, you're helping to bring light to get it onto the table in a way that is positively moving the needle for the owners, bringing that level of trust up on both sides uh,
Right.
and across the board. I mean, I would imagine that the time that this takes for each family is obviously very different given their history. But I don't know, maybe talk a little bit about what your experience has been with that, what that looks like.
Right. It's a continuous evolution and it's a process.
Yeah.
And frankly, I come into the room to get families to get into an effective cadence, rhythm, culture of effective communication, collaboration, and gaining clarity. But it doesn't stop when my engagement stops. The idea is to build up knowing effective ground rules for communicating, right? How do we listen to one another? How do we own our statements? How do we understand the perspectives, the priorities, and the preferences of everyone in the room and articulate our ideas in a way that would resonate with them so
Yeah.
that the families can carry on with continuous conversations and meetings, because I mean it's never ending, really. Legacy planning takes years, and there's always new factors that come in, new births, unfortunately exits, whether it's divorce or deaths or
Uh-huh.
changes in the business that necessitate that we continuously have ongoing conversations. But typically, when I come into a family, I've worked with families for over 3 years,
Okay.
where they want me to keep on hand
Keep
holding
on
them through the
going.
process.
Yeah.
Right. I've also done just a 1 year engagement, for instance, just coaching a successor.
Okay.
So it really depends. But my spirit and the way I work is to really set the families up to be able to effectively communicate on their own, where they're not dependent on me to communicate.
So I want to maybe take this to the next level, and that is theoretically. So in one way, you're teaching them this skill set that you're not just doing for them; you're teaching them how to do for themselves, so to
Right.
speak. So that if you're not there, theoretically, your work is sustainable, right? Like you said, it's an ongoing process. At some point, I have to imagine that the identity you're trying to probably help the second generation form their own identity
Yeah.
around their position within the business, or if for whatever reason, maybe we can come back to this, like if they go a different route, what does that even look like?
Right.
um, they probably have their own ideas, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
how do you get that to start to evolve in a way where they're feeling comfortable in their own voice, that the first generation is receptive to these ideas? What are some of your tools in the toolkit that help that process along?
Whoa, this is major. I come across this all the time. The next generation often do have their own ideas.
Sure.
For instance, they're more oriented towards tech or sustainability,
Hmm.
diversity and inclusion. A lot of the next generation are not necessarily interested in working in the business. They want to work on it or
Yep.
adjacent to it or do their own thing. And so, firstly, I work with each family member to get clear on their vision and their strategic priorities for the family enterprise.
Is that
I
something you kind of start at the initial onset doing an
with
interview?
the individuals, yeah.
Got it.
So I
Okay.
work with each person
Yeah.
to really understand their values, their vision, their mission, and how they would love to see things in the family enterprise broadly.
Yep.
And then I like to work with the siblings for them to form their united voice as a siblings partnership.
And why is that important to your process?
It's important because quite often the founders are very dominant figures that can be quite intimidating. And we may have unhealthy communication patterns in the family as a result of that, where the next gens have lost their voices
Mm-hmm.
to be able to articulate persuasively what they'd like to see from a very like business partners. Instead, what we see is them protesting.
Okay.
And right, it's really important if they come together with their siblings and they form a unified voice
Mm-hmm.
as business partners, they're more influential on the founder. Founders more likely to take them seriously. They
Yeah.
seem right. They have articulated clearly the reasons for their views, and that's not to say they'll get their way. By the way, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not.
I understand.
Yeah, I don't wave a magic wand and they'll get their way. But it's really about unity and not
Mm-hmm.
uniformity. But communication is key to that. Being able to communicate effectively in a way that folks would want to hear what you have to say, and so I
Yeah.
help them with gaining that
But
as
and
siblings.
I love that because I can see how, just taking a step back hypothetically, right? Imagine if you're the owner and you've got 3 or 4 kids, right? If you got obviously the estate issues, we know the estate attorneys are harping on that, but just from a business standpoint, if you've got varying views and they're not united, that's a headache in and of itself. So you're almost
Right.
eliminating friction that otherwise probably would be there. That's a genius move on your part.
Right. Thank you. Well, often why founders may not communicate is because they don't have clarity over who will be the successor, who's competent enough, who's
Yeah,
interested, and they may see division within the next generation themselves.
sure.
And so that stands in the way, right?
Yeah, naturally.
Mhm.
All right, we talked a little bit about this concept of championing change or doing that through, it sounds like getting their input, this unified front potentially from the siblings. Let's maybe flip it on its head though. Getting buy-in from the first generation, what are some of the things you've learned along the way to get them more warmed up and to be receptive to this incoming change from the second generation?
Right. A lot of the time, founders speak in a specific language. Like I love languages by Gary Chapman, right? And
Phenomenal book.
he amazing book.
Right?
And he hypothesizes that we each have a language in which we communicate our love to others and receive love. And I think it's similar in business families, not
Mm,
with respect to love, but with respect to what is of importance to us as
sure.
individuals, right?
Yeah.
It's really important when trying to champion change that the next generation take their time to really observe the founding generation, to understand, develop an empathy map. And I talk about this in the book. What are they thinking, feeling, seeing, hearing? What are their deepest anxieties and deepest aspirations? And any change that you want to champion has to speak to that. For instance, oh, we should invest in tech or we should professionalize the business. Why? Why is that of relevance to mum or dad? What are the 3 hot buttons and key things that keep mum and dad up at night? Is it,
Yeah.
for instance, they want to see revenue growing, they want to see productivity improving, they want to see a liquidity event? Now, anything that you are proposing has to speak to those 3 primary concerns. Otherwise, it's literally just going over their
Like
heads.
deaf
Right.
ears. Yeah,
Right.
understood. Okay.
Right.
Let's take a You mentioned this concept of like not working in the business, right, or working adjacent to the business. That requires a substantially different conversation. Talk to us about what that looks like and what your experience has been, in this front.
Right. I've had a lot of experience with clients that have made transitions from one side to the other, come
Okay.
into the business and found themselves lost in the system, trying to find their fit and find their feet, find themselves very generalist, whereas they want to really be able to see how they are meaningful contributors to the family enterprise at large. And if care's not watched on the side of the founder and the next generation and really finding that optimal fit, what would then happen is they lose interest, get disengaged because
Yeah.
their morale depletes. And then they start looking outside to get fulfilled and to see their gifts and talents being, making an impact in some other capacity, whether it's another startup of theirs, or their like becoming an entrepreneur in their own right, whether it's working in 9 to 5 or doing some kind of social impact. So it's really important to have a guided process of integrating the next generation into the family enterprise. That's if they wish to work in the business, right?
Okay.
Understanding their strengths, weaknesses, their interests, understanding their skill sets, and placing them in the appropriate role. Quite often, we have a lot of discussion about preparing the next generation for the business, but not enough about preparing the business for the next generation. So
When you say, sorry, what do you mean by that?
professionalizing the business to a place where it's easier for the next generation to truly integrate. So, do you have clear departments? Do you have clear job descriptions that are adhered to,
Got it.
clear reporting lines?
Mm,
Right? Do you have an actual strategic HR function?
hmm
Do you have clear KPIs for each member of staff, appraisals? Do you have, things
Like a
like
real
that?
business, sure.
Right, as
Okay.
opposed to this informal,
Mom and pop
inform
lifestyle.
mom and pop lifestyle where, frankly, a lot of them get lost in. So
Sure.
we need to think about how we're preparing the business for the next gen, not just preparing the next gen for the business. And equally, for those that decide, I'm not interested in working in the business, I'd rather work on the business or on my own thing, we need to think about how we're preparing them as owners. Because at the very least, in the future, they will be future owners of this business and
Passive
assets.
owners, right, but not actively
Right.
engaged in the business. Okay.
But that requires financial literacy, understanding of structuring and legal. That requires understanding of some solid business acumen,
hmm
how to make strategic decisions, how to collaborate with their family members in making decisions and other
Let,
stakeholders.
let me
It's
play
just as
devil.
difficult.
I bet. So let me play devil's advocate though. But like, what about the one who says, "Oh, I don't need to know about that stuff. Like, I just want to collect my, I want to own my shares and collect my, my passive income." Is that
It's
how do we get around
that's
that?
And that's a common issue we do see,
Yeah.
that there's no engagement. We may
Yeah.
have legal ownership and not enough emotional ownership. And we get around that by finding and articulating the shared purpose, the why,
The why.
as as Simon
Okay.
Sinek says, start with why. What's
Start with
that all-encompassing why that engages each family member and it's
yeah.
beyond just dollars and cents, that really
Okay.
motivates them,
And
right?
that you feel that really generally is able to draw them back in a way where they're willing to make the investment
Right.
to become at least knowledgeable in some of these areas around legal, financial, strategic decision making, communication, etc.
Right. As
Okay.
you allude to, it's a lot. It's not
Yeah, definitely.
it's not investing in Apple, right?
Sure.
It's
So, turning to you personally, one of the things you're passionate about and that you've created this identity, it sounds like from what I remember you sharing. So, your family has, I think, a manufacturing and construction business in Africa
right.
that you're the second generation owner. One of the things that you have taken on and created is this African family firms nonprofit community that you've built. Tell us a little bit more about that what it does for you with the clients that you're working with, why you're so passionate about it.
Right. The reason why I decided to co-found the African Family Firms and nonprofit community was in my journey, I found that it was extremely lonely. I was very intrigued about how peers were handling matters of succession, continuity, grappling as next generation, integrating into their businesses or leaving their businesses and establishing their own thing. But unfortunately, there was no community dedicated to family enterprise
Mm.
in Africa.
In
And I
Africa,
felt it was
right?
really, yeah, I felt it was
Wow.
really important to create a safe space where folks could come into trusted circles and really share experiences, support one another, learn from each other, and really grow together. And so African Family Firms has 4 pillars of activities. We are a membership network, so we have communities, pods of 8 to 10 members that meet on a monthly basis, like a forum style peer sharing.
Sharing, yeah.
Right. And then a second pillar of activity is education. We do a lot of education on succession and continuity, family governance, family wealth management, starting a family office, because a lot of the families on the continent, unfortunately, are not privy to all this knowledge and expertise. The US is
Yeah,
relatively mature
sure.
compared to other parts of the world in this area,
Yeah.
right? But for many families in Africa, this is all very new to them. So we do a lot of rudimentary knowledge, awareness building. Third pillar of activity is research with partner organizations to understand who these families are and what they're grappling with.
Mm,
And the fourth pillar of activity is advocacy. So pushing for policy changes on a national, regional, and continental basis. I must say that area is something that we're still kind of working on. We haven't really
sure.
gotten that much traction, but the other three we've fully, yeah, we're fully doing that.
That's quite impressive. So truly, like, you created something that's wasn't even there before, but that is now really mobilizing many of these families, or engaging them in a way that is meaningful for them. But also now it sounds like you're going to be able to take that to the next level to serve the, you know, the countries, the community, and the region. What do you think that something the rest of us could learn from your experience there in Africa, maybe to the rest of the world?
Right. I would say several things, but I'll just hone in on one is in African cultures. I mean, Africa is a continent and it's very diverse. Um, but there's tends to be across the continent, across various cultures, a reverence of elders.
Yeah.
So elders are deemed as wise, knowledgeable.
Mhm.
Um, they're whatever they say is not to go question. Obviously, that has a downside when it comes to
Sure.
intergenerational collaboration. But I think what that does is there's this reverence of elders in the family enterprise system where they're able to provide wisdom, they're
Yeah.
able to mediate conflict,
Yeah.
they're able to really oversee rituals. And so you not only have the fusing of the new and the novel with technology and new ways of doing things, but the tried and tested and the stories of the elders, right?
Yeah.
The triumphs that they've been through, which serve as avenues for collective learning, knowledge, and intelligence for the family. So I think that's an area that we're relatively strong on, is really revering the elders.
I love that. I think that is candidly something that probably is not as strong in American culture, and maybe even other societies. That's kind of been lost.
Mm,
But the experience, the wisdom, like you're saying, the rituals, those are all important things. And you know what I think it's so easy to forget was they were young ones too. There were new
right.
technologies at their time that they were probably invigorated in, and maybe some of those things were great, and maybe some of those things didn't work out, but they had the life experience that we can certainly learn from. Well, Nikè, look, we're going to start to wrap it up here. I call this the Ripcord moment because I believe when an owner goes through some sort of succession event, whether it's an exit to a third party, selling to their partners, or in this case, a family succession to the next generation. It's a little like jumping out of an airplane, right? They need a parachute for that safe landing. And I always ask our guests, 2 action items that an owner should do sooner than later if they're going to be thinking about one of these succession events. And so,
Mm,
what would be your 2 action items that you
mm.
would say for a family going through this transition to do sooner rather than later?
The first I would say is to get into conversation and plan a family meeting and start to have these collective conversations on what is the purpose, what's the vision, what's the mission. Like I said, it's a continuous process, and these are heavy topics where each family member has to really reflect on their values, their mission, and their purpose, and we have to align. And on my podcast, I did an episode a couple of months ago, episode 141. It's titled "Here's a quick and easy way to plan your family meeting," with things to
Okay.
think about. And yeah, so I definitely recommend that. So plan a family meeting and have conversations, effective conversations that allow for all voices to be heard and
Yeah.
align on your unified vision and mission. Um, the second thing I would say is community. Like I kind of alluded to, community is so
Mhm.
important because as business owners, it can be quite isolating. Selling your business, grappling with integrating the next generation. Who do you talk to about this? You're not going to talk about this at happy hour,
No.
right?
Yeah. So you're saying get into some sort of community where they can leverage resources like that you've built so that they have
Exactly.
peers to have these conversations with. They can share
Right.
their experiences. They can share what they're struggling with. Find other experts to bring to the table for them to move the process along.
For sure, definitely. I think there's a place for peer learning
Yeah.
and peer experience sharing. So communities like, say, Entrepreneurs Organization or Young President Organization or Vistage, where you can bond with other peers that are navigating similar transitions, and where necessary then get recommendations and references for experts that can sherpa you through that process.
Wonderful. Great conversation. Really enjoyed it. We touched on so many different things. If somebody in our audience wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way they can do that?
Awesome. My website, www.nikeanani.com. That's NikeAnani.com. On there, you'll find links to my podcast, my book, my email, my social media, my social security number. No, I joke.
Oh,
But literally everything you need is on there. And I'd
go
love
to
to.
NikèAnani.com. Check her out. And Nikè, thanks again for your time. I'm looking forward to being a guest
Thank
on your
you.
podcast in a few weeks
So
here
am
once we
I.
get that dialed in. And this is Joe Seetoo. We're going to sign off from the Ripcord Moment, and we'll catch you next time.